Former middleweight champions Anderson Silva and Georges St-Pierre easily go down as two of the greatest fighters to ever step foot inside the cage. And while both of them have notable achievements in the UFC, fans and fighters have always wondered who'd win if the GOATs fought each other. Michael Bisping has weighed in on the whole discussion, and honestly speaking, we're a bit shocked. Keep watching as we tell you everything the Brit had to say. First up, it all comes down to knockout power. Michael Bisping is one of the few fighters who've actually had the pleasure of fighting both champions. He fought Silva back in 2016 in what was one of the most entertaining fights we've ever seen. Bisping fought long and hard and managed to get the victory by decision in an intense 5-round brawl. But unfortunately, the Count missed out on beating both the GOATs after losing to St-Pierre in 2017, giving up the middleweight title after tapping out to a nasty submission by the Canadian. So you can imagine he must have picked GSP to win if he and Silva ever fought. After all, Bisping did beat Silva himself, right? It's only natural he picks the one who beat him. But surprisingly, the Brit has sided with Silva, claiming he had one thing GSP lacked. What's that, you might ask? Well, Bisping thinks the Spider had much more knockout power than St-Pierre, and if the two gentlemen ever squared off, that would end up being the deciding factor. Now, he didn't rule out the former double champ just like that. Believe it or not, he actually said Silva would likely lose the match if he's unable to get a knockout, and that's mainly because GSP would have shown up with a tremendous strategy. But if the Brazilian was able to land a high-power strike on target, it would be the end of St-Pierre. A pretty interesting take on the fight, to say the least. He has a point about Silva having more knockout power. Still, that's his own opinion, and we don't necessarily agree with it since it depends a lot on the weight class. Bisping is still really proud to have shared the octagon with both champions. I am so proud to have shared the octagon with both of these people, both absolute legends from the sport, both gentlemen, and both two of the nicest guys that you could ever meet. Next, welterweight or middleweight. Now, like we said, it's pretty obvious Silva would have more knockout power since he fought in the middleweight division, and let's not forget how he had a good run at light heavyweight too. So it's super obvious why he'd win if the fight was fought at the 185. But if we're talking about GSP, the guy was just mind-blowing in the welterweight division. He was a class apart, just a very agile, inventive, and strong fighter. It all comes down to this. What are we talking about here, Bisping? Welterweight or middleweight? Because that also happens to be the advantage. Make Anderson drop weight to compete at welterweight, and GSP would just pick him apart because he'd be so drained. That's what Bisping thinks too. Despite losing his title to the Canadian in the middleweight division, he picked the Spider to win at 185, but at 170, it's an entirely different story. Did you know that both legends were actually pretty keen on taking each other on back in 2010? GSP wanted to move up a weight class and challenge Silva for the middleweight title, and the Spider also did a couple of interviews saying he wanted to drop weight and fight the former double champ. Since both these men were the biggest names in the promotion, fans were quick to rally behind that idea. It would have been an incredible fight, probably the biggest in the history of the sport. These guys were just so invincible at their peak, no one could ever think of messing with them. But apparently, Bisping claims since Silva had already put on some amazing performances at light heavyweight, Dana didn't really entertain the idea of having him cut so much weight just for a single fight. But was it a missed opportunity? Frankly speaking, the UFC could have cashed out boatloads of money from this fight. Not only would they have generated millions of dollars, but it would have brought so many eyes to the UFC, like two of the greatest mixed martial artists fighting each other. Don't know about you, but that sounds like a global headline to us. We think it's a missed opportunity because the promotion didn't want to compromise their individual successes. What do we mean? Well, Silva was fighting at light heavyweight when this fight was a possibility, and GSP was at welterweight. Either St-Pierre had to step up or Silva had to move down, and that's really as simple as it was. Both gentlemen switch one weight class and fight in the middleweight division, but since GSP didn't have a fight at 180 yet, a lot of people viewed it as a disadvantage since the Spider was the GOAT of that weight class. The next possibility was Silva dropping to welterweight, but like we said, that would have drained the life out of him, doing quite some damage to his career. But about 7 years later, when GSP dropped Bisping at middleweight for the title, everyone sort of realized how they missed out on setting up one of the biggest fights in combat sports history. The former double champ did pretty well at 185, proving he could have upset the Brazilian. Time for some more on the UFC. Up next, a quick finish. Paulo Costa started off with a bang, but ever since his bout against Israel Adesanya in September 2020, it seems like the Brazilian has been unable to shake off the loss. He has 2 losses in his professional MMA career, and both of them came back-to-back. First Adesanya, and then Marvin Vettori. Adesanya we get, but Marvin Vettori? We seriously expected better from Costa. Still, the Eraser is charged up for his next fight as he takes on former middleweight champion Luke Rockhold at UFC 278. And even though Costa has promised to finish Luke quickly and return to his winning ways, did you know that this is his last fight fight at the UFC? Yep, the Lean Machine is actually going to be fighting out his contract at UFC 278, and that's why a win is really important if he wishes to re-sign with the UFC. But that's not the only option he has. He could even taste free agency if he wanted to, and if all else fails, there's always boxing, right? Ex-UFC fighters have made a ton of cash fighting exhibition matches against YouTubers and other boxers, but in Costa's case, it might be a bit difficult, since he looks like an absolute animal no one would want to mess with. Let's talk about the Chechen Wolf. Khamzat Chimaev has been putting in the hours, getting ready for his next fight against UFC legend Nate Diaz, and unlike his fans and fellow fighters, he doesn't care if he's the favorite. All he wants to do is stop the Stockton Slugger in his path to line himself up for a shot at the title. And since Kamaru Usman is also gearing up to defend his title against Leon Edwards at UFC 278, the winners of both these fights will definitely be battling it out for the welterweight championship later this year. We're hoping both Usman and Chimaev are able to win, so we get to see them fully go at it inside the octagon in a high-stakes, high-pressure matchup. But the undefeated Chechen-born fighter is still unsure whether he'll get a title shot, even if he records a win against Diaz. And he doesn't say that because of Dana White's weird matchmaking techniques. He says it's because he thinks Kamaru is scared of him. That's really a bold claim from the undefeated fighter, but it does seem like the Nigerian Nightmare has been avoiding him for quite some time now. So if everything goes according to plan, we might get to see the two titans fight for glory and bragging rights real soon. Finally, you're welcome, but not as a champion. It's probably hard being Leon Edwards right now, fighting for the title against the #1 pound-for-pound fighter at the UFC. There's only two ways this can go down. He gets murdered inside the cage, or he wins and everyone calls him lucky. A few days ago, a reporter asked Edwards who he'd want to fight after winning the welterweight title. The Brit took Gamebred's name and talked about how he's going to give him a shot at the title, only to whoop him inside the cage. But then Masvidal comes into play and he says he really appreciates Leon wanting to fight him and he welcomes that, but he doesn't see him beating Kamaru even in his dreams. Now, that's just sad. Almost everyone has been talking down at him, saying he's never even gonna come close to beating the Nigerian Nightmare, hoping we aren't in for an upset at UFC 278. That's it from our side, folks. So, what do you think? Who would have won if the two GOATs fought each other? And is Bisping right about Silva being the winner? Let us know in the comments below. Remember, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more exciting videos in the future. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you next time.